I would like to call the business meeting of the Portland Board of Public Education to order. It is Tuesday, November 21st, 2023. We're meeting in a hybrid format with some of us here at Casco Bay High School and some online via Zoom. I think Board Member Figdor and Board Member Abilio will be joining us online. Let's go ahead and start. Deputy Superintendent Townsend, would you please call the roll? I'm sorry, am I moving too fast? Are you good? Okay.
Member Bilyeu. Vice Chair Bondo.
Présent.
Member Bryden.
Here.
Member Figdor. Member Grant.
Here.
Member Opperman.
Here.
Member Russell Better.
Here.
Member Youssef.
Here.
Member Ellis.
Here.
Member Human.
Here.
Member McLaughlin. Member Santiago. And Chair Lentz.
Here. Thank you, Deputy Superintendent. And now the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Portland Public Schools recognizes the original inhabitants of the land on which our city and schools stand. The Wolastoqiyik or Maliseet, Micmac, Penobscot, and Passamaquoddy tribes known collectively as the Wabanaki Confederacy or People of the Dawnland. We're honored to have Wabanaki children among our students today, and as a district, we are committed to making the past, present, and future of Wabanaki peoples visible in our schools and classrooms. Board Member Bryden, would you like to read the mission tonight?
Is it in Board Docs?
I will read the mission and you can do it next time. Okay, perfect. No, that's fine. I'll get it printed out too so we can pass it around. The Portland Public Schools is responsible for ensuring a challenging, relevant, and joyful education that empowers every learner to make a difference in the world. We build relationships among families, educators, and the community to promote the healthy development and academic achievement of every learner. And now I'm going to move us into public comment. So if you have public comment here in the room, please come up to the podium. And if you're on Zoom, please raise your hand. I'm just going to go over our guidelines for public comment. So you can speak on any subject directly related to the operations of schools, except for personnel matters or complaints concerning specific employees or students. Comments are limited to a maximum of 3 minutes or 6 minutes for individuals using an interpreter. Individuals may not relinquish a portion of their allotted time to another speaker. The board may not respond to comments, and please refrain from responding in the audience. Speakers must refrain from engaging in disruptive conduct, including but not limited to vulgar and/or obscene language, threatening others using words or by other actions, using pejorative or discriminatory language with reference to a person or a group on the basis of their religion, ethnicity, nationality, race, color, descent, gender, or other identity factor, making defamatory comments, exceeding the allotted time limits, talking over, interrupting others, offering repetitive comments, and offering comment on matters unrelated to the school district's programs, policies, or operations. I'll stop any public comment that is contrary to these rules. To give public comment, please come forward to the podium and raise your hand, or raise your hand on Zoom. Begin by introducing yourself with your name and address. We'll alternate batches from Zoom and in person if needed. I'll keep the time and raise a yellow folder indicating that you have 30 seconds remaining, and I'll raise a red folder signifying the end of your time. So hold on, let me get my folders up. Go ahead.
Good evening. My name is Elizabeth Capone Newton. I live on Tucker Ave, and this is a poem by Ani DeFranco in the form of a song. It's about the topic of courage. The surgeon was cradling the softest, warmest part of you in his hands. Feels like a little baby bird falling from the nest. I think that your body is something I understand. I think that I'm happy. I think that I'm blessed. I've got a lack of inhibition. I've got a loss of perspective. I've had a little bit to drink. Not true. And it's making me think that I can jump ship and swim, that the ocean will hold me, that there's got to be more than this boat I'm in. 'Cause they can call me crazy if I fail. All the chance that I need is 1 in a million, and they can call me brilliant if I succeed. Gravity is nothing to me, moving at the speed of sound. Do you never make eye contact with people making public comments, Superintendent? I'm just gonna get my feet wet until I drown. I teeter between tired and really, really tired. I'm wiped and I'm wired, but I guess it's just as well. Because I've built my own empire out of car tires and chicken wire. And I'm queen of my own compost heap. And I'm getting used to the smell. I've got a lack of information from the union, but I've got a little revelation. And I'm climbing up on the railing, trying not to look down. I'm gonna do my best swan dive into shark-infested waters. And I'm gonna pull out my tampon and start splashing around. 'Cause I don't care if they eat me alive.
Please, Elizabeth.
'Cause I've got better things to do than to survive. I've got a vision of blue sky and dry land. I've got a memory of your warm skin in my hand. I'm cradling the hardest, heaviest part of you in my hands. The ship is pitching and heaving. Our limbs are bobbing and weaving.
Elizabeth, that's the end.
And I think that this is what I understand. I just need a couple vaccinations
Elizabeth, I need you
for
to
my
wrap it up, please.
faraway vacation.
Thank you.
I'm gonna go ahead boldly, 'cause a little bird told me that jumping is easy and falling is fun, right up until you hit the sidewalk, shivering, stunned. And I don't care if they eat me alive. I've got better things to do than to survive. I've got the memory of your.
If anyone else would like to give public comment, now is the time to come to the podium or raise your hand on Zoom. Okay, seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and close public comment. And I'm going to move us into my report of the chair. And I know we have a pretty big meeting tonight in a short week, so I'm just going to do a couple of announcements and then a short reading. So the last district meeting, District 5, is next Wednesday, November 29th at 6 p.m. And that's a virtual district meeting with Councillor Dion, soon to be our new mayor. Those district meetings have been really, really wonderful, so really encourage folks to attend those. There's also a coat drive happening at Portland High School, and you can donate new or like new coats for students, and you can drop those off. There's actually a box outside the school where you can drop off coats. One of our staff members, Andrea Levinsky, has been doing a lot of organizing around that. So please take your coats in if you've got them. High school preference night, our information night, is coming up on December 6th from 6:30 to 8. That's when families and students can learn about all of our high schools and the offerings that they provide. And I also just wanted to highlight the Rise and Shine Cafe that just launched at Deering High School. The Functional Life Skills program there set up a coffee shop that students work and offer coffee during the day to students and staff. The pictures are really cool, and I'm just really thankful to Mr. Ryan Char for supporting our students in this cool endeavor. This week also marks Thanksgiving and the National Day of Mourning. Whatever you choose to celebrate, or if you choose to celebrate, I just wanted to mark those events this week and just use a little reading from Indigenous author Robin Wall Kimmerer. And she writes about the practice of giving thanks. She says, "Know the ways of the ones who take care of you, so that you may take care of them. Introduce yourself. Be accountable as the one who comes asking for life. Ask permission before taking. Abide by the answer. Never take first. Never take the last. Take only what you need. Take only that which is given. Never take more than half. Leave some for others. Harvest in a way that minimizes harm. Use it respectfully. Never waste what you have taken. Share. Give thanks for what you have been given. Give a gift in reciprocity for what you have taken. Sustain the ones who sustain you, and the earth will last forever." And on that note, I'm going to turn it over to Board Member Representative Caden Ement. I'm so sad you're leaving us.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening. It's hard to believe it, but we are already well over a fourth of the way through the school year. The end of the first quarter was marked by a number of exciting events at PHS. The pep rally was held in the gym for the first time since pre-pandemic, and I must say it was simultaneously the most hectic, energetic, and entertaining pep rally I have experienced in my 4 years. The seniors won the annual banner competition with their Barbie-inspired banner welcoming the Red Riots to PHS as Ken's Mojo Dojo Casa House. The following weekend, our boys and girls cross-country teams had amazing successes at the Class A state championship meet, with the boys placing first in the state for the first time since 1978, and the girls placing third in the state, marking their best performance in program history. At New England's the weekend after, both teams came in first out of all teams from Maine, with the girls placing ninth in all of New England. The PHS football team finished their otherwise undefeated season with a tough loss to TA last weekend at the Class A state championship. However, we are all looking forward to taking down Deering at the Thanksgiving Day Thursday morning, bringing an official end to the fall sports season as winter sports practices start up this week. The PHS esports team has been extremely successful this year and won their match against Vermont Champlain Valley High School last week. The Portland High math team had their second meet of the season earlier this month, placing first in the Portland Large Division and currently seated 12th out of 118 teams in the state. Last Friday, the PHS Outing Club held skateboarding lessons, providing all the gear and rad know-how for newbies to totally shred in the gym. In response to the tragedy in Lewiston last month, our beloved librarian, Ms. Nick, led students and staff in plastering the back wall of windows in the PHS cafeteria with hearts and messages of support. A photo of the wall was turned into posters with the caption, "PHS stands with you," and those posters can now be found throughout the halls at Lewiston High School. Additionally, the Portland High Key Club has been handing out orange ribbons for gun violence awareness and collecting donations for the Lewiston Families and Victims Fund. Seniors are in the thick of the college application process, submitting regular decision applications, preparing for interviews, and eagerly awaiting the decisions on their early applications that will begin to come out in the next few weeks. I think I speak for all of us when I say January is looking better than ever. Best of luck to all seniors on applications and acceptances. As this will be my final report, I want to express my deepest gratitude to the board for the amazing experience this position has afforded me over this past year. While I am sad to go, I'm also extremely excited to see Charlotte take over this role. She is driven, passionate, and not afraid to speak her mind, and I cannot wait to see all that she will do. That concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We're so grateful to everything that you've given us. And with that, I'm going to pass it to the superintendent.
Good evening. I'm going to give Aaron a second just to walk up to the front, but following a similar theme to Board Chair Lentz, I will be doing a slightly shorter set of comments, and then we will have a longer presentation. Aaron, if you want to go to the next slide. Just one thing I do want to highlight, just to make sure it gets out there. So last week I had the opportunity to visit Portland High School and spend a bunch of time in their fine arts area. And so both the ceramics, the AP art classes, there was like 4 or 5, and it just reminded me that I have PTSD from taking art myself in high school, but there were some really promising art students there, and just reminded me of the skill and the talent that we have present in our schools. And we will actually have a celebration of that. And so we'll be joining Portland's First Friday. And on December 1st, anybody is welcome to come to our central office at 353 Cumberland. It'll actually start a little bit earlier from 3 to 5 p.m. and you'll be able to walk through and see our students' art on exhibit. And so we look forward to welcoming everybody to that. So if I can take board members back a moment, just hold on, Aaron, 1 second. In September, we came together and we spent time in a retreat. And during that retreat, we identified both some key priorities and some aligned initiatives that we would focus on in the school year 23-24 as we prepared for the larger strategic plan that would happen over the next 5 years that is getting created this year. Tonight is the first night where we will do progress monitoring on those priorities in one of the areas. And so tonight we are going to be joined, we're very fortunate to be joined by a number of our staff and our teammates from both academics, data, special education, and HR that will be sharing where we're at on progress. Just to orient you, I don't expect that any time that we do progress monitoring that we're going to come up here and tell you that everything's perfect and that everything's rosy. In fact, this is the honest conversation about where we're at and where we're seeing great successes and where we may need to adjust our plan because of unforeseen challenges that we need to address. And so that is what we'll be doing this evening. Just to orient you, to remind folks, so we started with this idea of establishing some key objectives. We came up with 4 of them. They're in the board docs, but at a high level, they get down to we're one team and we have systems that support that. The second is around our capacity to monitor and support academic and climate. The third is around our actual performance on EL and climate. And then the fourth is around our operations and our systems. And so you can see up there, that's objective 1. We're actually going to monitor objective 2 today, so I should have done that one. But that shows you the sort of tiering. That objective is the high level, and then underneath it are the priorities. And so from a process end, this is how we're using our key objectives and priorities within the district. So we established those in September. Those guide then the work of our departments and become the key focuses that they are working on throughout the year. Twice a year at Cabinet, we monitor where we're at relative to those goals and those initiatives. And we, in some cases, say, like, look, we need to adjust the plan here based on where we're at. We did that about 2 weeks ago. And then we come here and say, we want to share with you where we're at and share with the public where we're at. We look forward to your feedback. We will take that feedback and take it back to the department level and use that to, again, revise our plans to make sure that we're continuing to move forward. And so with that, I'm going to, let me just talk to you real quick about the monitoring schedule. We originally set the objectives based on sort of like 4 key areas. And then when we looked at when to monitor them, we looked at when it would be most appropriate in the school year based on the data and information that would be available. And so it's a little bit counterintuitive, but we're actually monitoring objective 2 first because we'll have more data to monitor some of the others at another point. And so you can see up there that we'll monitor this objective tonight and then again in February. And so you can see when each of those are. And so with that, I'm going to pass it to Deputy Superintendent Townsend, who's going to lead us through our monitoring and our updates on Objective 2.
Great. Good evening, everybody. I promise it's not just me, so I'm very glad to be joined this evening by a number of our esteemed colleagues. So Matthew Powers, our Director of Data Analytics, will speak in just a moment. Jesse Applegate, our Director of Special Student Support Services. Pamela Atuno, who you all know, our Director of Secondary Access and Outcomes. And of course, Barrett Wilkinson, our Executive Director of People and Equity. So Carlos Gomez, who is kind of one of the owners of one of these priorities, isn't able to be with us tonight, so I'll speak to his priority. So as Superintendent Scallon said, we are looking at the second objective tonight, which we've articulated as growing our capacity to ensure the achievement of all learners, starting with our historically marginalized students. So this one is really around trying to build system capacity such that we have both the infrastructure as well as the kind of programs and capacities to make sure, as it says, we're ensuring the achievement of all learners. So we look forward to talking about more of the direct teaching and learning and school culture work and upcoming progress monitoring. That's objective 3. So we'll look at these 5 priorities. In each of the priority slides, you can see the initial kind of high level take in terms of kind of the status of them either being on track, at risk, or off track. And so each will take turns. There's only a handful of slides for each. So we'll kind of speak, relatively quickly to kind of the high level of what we're expecting by the end of the year, where we're at the moment and why we think we're there in terms of, what we've accomplished and what some of the current challenges are, and then what some of those key next steps are specifically really between now and our next progress monitoring update to either continue the work, in being on track or to make some of those adjustments that we spoke about. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome up Matthew Powers, our Director of Data and Analytics, to walk us through the first priority.
Oh, you do the slides for me? Thank you. Hi there, I'm Matthew Powers. Very glad to be here to speak with you all tonight. So my objective is number 1 in the list. We're speaking specifically about developing a data system to monitor progress and inform intervention. And so we have a lot of data. We have a lot of data processes in place. But we've established a new data team for this year. So we are kind of re-aggregating and re-understanding organizational knowledge from kind of a base level. And we're working to develop data system capacity as a starting focus that will be used to create an interim reporting regime and a reporting system that will be used to support quick decision-making and leadership level decision-making. And use that process to define requirements for a larger scale reporting solution. So we have kind of 2 bullet points to speak to. By June, we would like to facilitate quarterly progress monitoring with cabinet level and decision-making individuals around what data is important to them and what is useful for making decisions. In kind of a stepwise way, the second bullet point involves a process of establishing a long-term solution. What does a larger data reporting system look like? And what would be useful of the metrics that we produce? What is useful at the teacher level and an aggregate population that would be supportive of looking at students at the subgroup, school, and district level specifically. So we are marking the objective at risk because we are a new data team. We are using our time in the first quarter of the year to understand kind of existing data sources and systems that are in place, trying to figure out what works well and what needs improvement. And there are a lot of kind of caveats to that. There's a lot of, we have a very complicated data system, but its complexity is not by its technical nature. It's in that there's a lot of different ways that data is utilized across the system that we need to account for. So in working to understand capacity and data availability, we in the first quarter, we have made strides in understanding, especially data culture, and developing connections between lots of different data sources that we have at our district level. So right now we're focusing on database integrity and kind of developing tools for broader access to data. Our goal is ultimately to bring data visibility to as many people as possible. We would like, even at the teacher level, to have an access point for those people to really be able to understand their students and their population. So we've done a lot of great work and we've accomplished a lot of things so far. We've determined the current status of data usefulness. I think was a good reminder for me about how we kind of have to move through data systems and as new stewards have to understand those data systems. So that's kind of taken us through a journey, but I think we've made a lot of progress. And we've understood how data systems are interrelated. We have Infinite Campus as our primary database. We have a lot of other constituent data parts that kind of build together to make a whole, that we want to figure out those interactions. So I think we've done a good job there. And we've run into a few challenges, mostly around standardization. We have some missing data. We have some incorrect values, and the way data is interpreted across the system can be slightly varied. So figuring out how we standardize those things is kind of a more longer term project that I think we're kind of figuring out what next steps look like. And we've kind of figured out what we would like to identify as gaps between our current status and where the district's vision for data is ultimately. So kind of working through what that looks like in the long term. And then finally, one of our, I listed it under challenges, but it's actually an opportunity, is what we want to kind of think through what data tools we will use for data access in the future. So that's a process that hopefully we will have an opportunity to discuss as kind of the data process unfolds. My next slide, thank you. So in the short term, we have developed performance indicators to kind of establish a foundation for the quality management process. And the idea would be that we use those indicators along with a work group to flesh out and develop a priority for broader utilization. So our date kind of ranges are semi-flexible, but we're trying to stick to kind of a more pointed schedule to try and get us through the year. But I want to point out specifically, we'd like to talk about launching a data work group sometime in December. Will help us kind of work through some of these challenges and thought processes about what is useful and what is data that we want to really use to improve teaching and learning. And so we have a dedicated data team, and we want to fold in individuals who have in-classroom experience, who have an opinion about how they would use data overall, and use those opinions to inform what what would be useful in a data system for those individuals as we kind of move our data access and long-term solution forward.
Great. We're going to go ahead, just because of the brevity of them, we're going to go through and do each one and take questions at the end. Okay. Yeah. So sorry, I didn't say that. So next, I'm happy to invite up Jesse Applegate, our Director of Student Support Services, to talk about Priority 2.2.
It's good to be with everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to come in and share with you tonight. I really appreciate it. So this is the second priority, and this is focused on our specialized program. So the priority is that we are going to be updating our service delivery model for our specialized programs. To give some context on what we mean by that. Most students with IEPs are, I would say, spend most of their time in general education. They receive some services outside of the general education setting, but they spend a good amount of time in general education. For students with significant needs that it's hard to meet as much in that setting, we have our specialized programs, which is what we're going to talk about tonight. And then also just to mention, we do have a small number of students who are served in special purpose schools, privately run special purpose schools because of the significance of their need as well. So that's the continuum that's on the slide here. But just to talk about the specialized program specifically, so we have three that are across, all the grade spans. So we have our beach program, which is for students who typically have, significant behavioral and functional needs related to autism. That's the beach program. We have functional life skills program, which, as the name sort of suggests, is for students with really significant functional support and development needs. It typically related to like intellectual disabilities. Those are both largely self-contained programs. And then our third and by far our largest program, as you can see, we have it in all of the secondary schools now and 3 of the elementary schools. is the BREATHE program. So the BREATHE program is a program for students with needs related to like social, emotional, behavioral things, but it is designed to be flexible so that students, depending on their need, can spend more or less time in the general education setting. So it's designed that way to be more integrated like that. So those are the programs. So in terms of what we're trying to accomplish this year, we are going to establish a shared vision for how we deliver services for all students in these programs. And then we're going to develop an implementation plan to put that into practice for next year, for the next school year. Okay, so I just want to also share, right now, so that we're currently off track. And the reason that we are considering it off track is because our focus has been this school year on stabilizing a few programs that are, really in need of additional support. This is related to staffing issues, so vacancies, as well as the need to, and these two things are connected, but also the need to be able to establish what we're calling foundational work. So, complex scheduling, being able to develop individualized programs for students are all important parts of running these programs. And our team has been really leaning in to support both with the staffing and with the establishment of, and the just doing this work. Those programs in particular, I'll just share, are the elementary beach and FLS programs, the beach program at Ocean, the FLS at Talbot. We've also been leaning in to the BREATHE support program at Longfellow. So those are three particular programs that have needed that level of support. And so that's where we are. We are supporting those programs by identifying staff. We have been able to hire throughout the year. We've also been able to cover vacancies with contracted staff, which has been helpful, but it still requires continued work on our part. And again, that's just been the strong focus of our specialized programs team. So in terms of the sort of benchmarks for this year, our key next steps, right now, focus continues to be on providing that immediate support. No question, we're continuing recruitment, continuing to be engaged with those programs closely to help stabilize them. Also landing the shared administrative model with building principals is another big priority for us and will help us clarifying that will help us continue to support these programs as best we can. Moving forward beyond that, we are planning to establish a work group that will sort of take a look, stepping back at specialized programming as a whole. The idea being to think about potential updates to how we currently provide these services to students, and then ultimately develop that vision for what it should look like across the district. Once we do that, we intend to then figure out sort of the details of that and ultimately, prepare to implement it. So, we look forward to digging into that work and continuing to keep the board updated on our progress there.
Great. So I'm going to report out on our work, priority 2.3 in terms of building our general educators' capacity to implement highly effective instructional strategies and practices for multilingual learners. So this is connected to the work that the board supported and kind of launched with the resolution last spring around, ESOL credentialing and how to grow that capacity over the next 4 years. So our goals for this year are to be able to pilot multiple program options for at least 100 educators to be able to learn, what's worked, what kind of impacts we're seeing, the kind of coordination logistics associated with it, so that can inform the second objective there, what our kind of implementation plan is to scale over the next few years, be able to support this level of training and development for all educators. In this one, we've kind of designated as at risk as we've gotten organized. We're working to kind of finalize the pilot launch. This first phase, kind of first trimester of the year was doing some research, building off the work that folks in our Department of Language Development had been doing, in terms of identifying what those pilot options would be. So we've secured some additional contracted support to help manage this, now ultimately have determined a few pilot options, but there was a bunch of work to go into kind of narrowing to what we were going to launch this year and establishing partnerships and so forth. We've been engaged with a number of districts, not so much in Maine per se, a little bit here, but mostly in Massachusetts and other states that have kind of taken on this work more broadly. So, we're getting ready to launch, so feel optimistic about, kind of the trajectory here. So, that's our, kind of key priorities is getting these off the ground. We've kind of finalized those partnerships, as we've said. They're working on a calendar and planning to begin the implementation. So we have 3 kind of different pathways we're pursuing for this spring to kind of meet that benchmark of the 100+ educators. We're working in partnership with our pre-K team to be able to build the capacity of pre-K educators to be full language teachers. As you may remember, we talked about that some during the budget process and the questions around our kind of DLL teacher model and the recognition that early educators are just teaching language to all kids, right? And so the focus around that. So that's the planning for that and the supports, about to, or the implementation is about to launch. We've also been partnering with Beth Linovich and Julia Hazel, thinking about our new teachers as they're coming into the classroom and integrating in the supports that they receive in their monthly PD and support to be able to build capacity there. So those are 2 of the ones about to launch. And then we've identified a few university partnerships that we're enrolling folks in recruiting folks for. So one through USM, and then I'll show you an example here at the end of the kind of partnership that we're recruiting staff for through the University of Maine Farmington. So this is, of course, just the last piece. And you can see we'll continue with that, right? Be learning from those so that we can inform the next steps and kind of scaling up over the course of the summer and into next year. But this is just the example here before we move to the next priority of the UMF course offering. That's a starting point for what we're enrolling folks in. So they've created this just for PPS educators. And so as you can see, kind of an introductory piece around multilingual learners. It's an initial course on the pathway towards for teachers to earn their 660 endorsement, which is the ESOL teacher endorsement. So we're excited, the partnership with Carlos and Julia Hazel, to be able to offer that this coming semester in the winter, kind of winter spring semester. So we're in the midst of recruiting educators for that. So that's just an example of, one of the partnerships we've been able to establish and how we're trying to lean into building this capacity. So next I'm going to invite up Barrett Wilkinson, our Executive Director of People and Equity, to talk about our equity literacy work.
So this is the goal focused around just the equity literacy professional development. So it's going to be a little more succinct because this is certainly not about professional development overall. But we have 2 main priorities. One is around how we advance equity literacy with leadership. So all school leaders as well as department leaders as well. And then how we advance equity literacy at the school and site level, which is the kind of ongoing process through our equity leaders cohort. So that's entering its 5th year. So that we have some structure that we're building on with that to continue that work. So in general, this is on track. We already launched for the year equity-oriented leadership with all school leaders. So that happened both in September and October, or no, October and November. We didn't do September because we meet at the very beginning of the month. And then the equity leaders cohort has also launched for the year. So while it's on track, there's always challenges when it comes to teacher professional development because their time is so limited and it's in high demand, right? And so the scheduling of equity literacy, it doesn't mean it's not as important as anything else. It's just that everything for the professional development time is very valuable. So that will continue to be a thing we work on and keep it on track as much as possible with our sites. And so this is sort of just the schedule of how this is rolling out and where we're at. So just to be in the weeds with it, really kind of, this is what it's looked like every year, even while we haven't necessarily, had it tracked in this way where, at a certain point we have expectations around schools having done, their first equity literacy professional development. And then by the end of the year doing the second one. So this year we're requiring 2. The focus of those is 1 on supporting students with special education designation as an equity literacy issue. So I'm working tightly with Jesse on that. And then 1 will be around going deeper in the recommendations and sort of almost a status update at the sites for the Educators of Color Insights report. Because it has been several years since we launched that, and a lot of our priority work has been driven from that. And so that will be one of the other main focus areas. And so that's sort of where we're headed over the course of the school year. So I think I will leave it at that. I'll pass it back to you.
Great. And for our last one, this is the objective with the most priorities. So no, in the future that there'll be fewer, but I'm excited to welcome Pamela Tuno to talk about the status of our high school design work.
Hi, everyone. So good to see you guys again. In this one here, right, the goal is that by June, we will have a completed draft of the application for the integrated consolidated high school. And there's a lot that needs to be done between now and then. So, but really the goal there is that the purpose and the strategic idea behind this is out to streamline resources, right, as well as just bring collaboration and align the 3 high schools together and in order to, just enhance the educational experience of all of our students. Right. So happy to report that we are on track in doing this work. So just really wanted to share that, as you are all aware, we created our Portrait of a Graduate and Portrait of a School community. And then as the school year started, we launched by actually presenting to all 3 high schools. And that was really to just honor our commitment to transparency, communication, and really engagement. So all our staff sort of heard where we've come from, where we currently are, and where we're headed as well. And then, building on that, we pushed forward and reconvened the design team and scheduled school visits, and we've attended 2 so far. So we've gone out of state to look at other schools. Now, I do want to share, this is very exciting and we're on track, but also just to recognize that there are some challenges, but before that, just what's important to note is that we do have people who still have a hard time with this idea of the consolidated integrated high school. And so we're really working to make sure that we address those needs as well, and that we're hearing from folks and that we're bridging that gap for people in terms of what we're really trying to do and what they think we are trying to do. Hence our shift to sort of calling it high school of the future and sort of trying to drop that consolidated term there. Additionally, one thing that, we have noted is that we need more representation on the design team. So we're looking to recruit more parents, especially our elementary school parents, as they're the ones who will have kids that will really experience this school of the future. So we're working on that. But just despite those challenges of, tension between what this all means and not having everyone we need on the design team, we have made gains and we're still on track. And so really dedicated to this work and overcoming obstacles so that we can create a really great, innovative, unified school for all of our students to enhance their experience. There's the timeline, as you can see there. So in the timeline, as mentioned, we'll be sort of turning our design team into our advisory board and engaging the community in what's happening, and also, engaging architects in this work as we design and we lay out what this will all look like and what it'll all mean. And really the goal is that between now and the next time I believe I will be meeting with you is February to give you an update. is to outline the programs that will be offered. So we've started drafting that with the design team and gotten feedback from others. Also just outline how we'll integrate career and technical education into this, outline the college classes that will be offered at the site for students instead of off campus. And then we'll also begin discussing at that time, when I meet with you again, how industry specific training will be offered to students at the location by businesses. So looking forward to sharing that update with you. And then so just wanted to share some photos from the school visits we attended. We went to Massachusetts and went to Blackstone Valley Tech and Minuteman Tech. And it was really phenomenal to go and visit these two schools. And, the goal was to see how school could be done differently. I didn't really realize that we would see how much differently we could do school. And we don't really need to reinvent or dream in a way that it doesn't exist. There are schools doing this, and we really just need to collaborate and borrow and think about how we can do things differently. So we saw academics and real career technical education, right, all enveloped in these schools, being done side by side. It wasn't in a separate vocational school or CT school. We saw kids really sort of engaging with being held to high standards. And the rigor was right up there. We saw kids doing algebra with, like as they would in a college class or in a career field. And we saw them really enjoying this whole experience. I remember asking the kids, like, what would you change? And they really shared, like, they described their experience as fun. And they really loved it, and they wouldn't change anything or look to have a different way of learning. And so that was really great to see. And the other thing was like just the collaboration between adults and the staff was really awesome to see, and how the staff were leaders in their schools, and so it wasn't just the principal, but they led that work. And one of the principals actually shared, because it was clear the culture was very was very different than what sometimes we experience. And one of the principals shared that the reason for the low like behavior incidents was because the kids were engaged with the activity and the learning that they were receiving, and also that there was this mutual respect between the student and the teacher. And it's funny, the one thing he said is, it's amazing what happens when kids respect the teachers, and so they hold the kids to high standards, and the kids will work up to to meet those standards because they respect the teachers very much. And they also had a student advisory committee that actually led the work of the culture and climate, and it was intentional that there was respect. So they intentionally laid out frameworks to teach respect, and they have that be throughout the school. And you could see posters also outlining all of that. So it was just, it was inspiring to see that this could be done, especially the learning model with the academics and these students, at Blackstone Valley Tech, and they've got students of all diversity levels there, and you've got students that have multiple pathways in which they go, right, from Ivy League schools to going into a career field, but they enter in and they get their supports they need while still being held to high standards. So it was just great to see, and we shared all that back with the design team, and which was very inspirational and motivating as we continued building what that program would look like for us. Thank you.
I guess we don't have our usual question slide, but now is the time. That's the end. So happy to take any initial questions for any of these priority areas.
And maybe we can go through them, so we kind of like bunch the questions, if that's okay.
Yep.
So let's do the first one, which is data. Board member, Vice Chair Bondo. I apologize.
Thank you for the presentation. Thank you so much. So the question came to my mind just to have a little clarification. I know it's at risk right now because you found a previous system than we had. And then you try to learn exactly what's going on. So I try just to look at the most challenging part is that the way you see things is that do we have different ways for each building, I mean, each school?
has its own way to collect data and coming to your own software. So I just need to have a little sense how the most challenging is to try to connect with those different data, or it's just the most challenging the way those pipelines of connecting data from each building are coming to your software.
It's a great question. So we have lots of different data components, and so we have lots of different indicators. So there are separate challenges for each kind of thought process for each different indicator that we're working through. I think we have seen and continue to see evidence that schools do collect data slightly differently across the board, whether we're talking about grading or attendance, and kind of the spectrum. There are slightly different variations about how that happens. We are actually looking at old code and writing some new pieces of information that is going to standardize a lot of that. So I would say that's from a challenge perspective, we're at risk because we don't have all of the answers to those questions. So for me to say we're on track and I'm 100% confident that things are going to work out, there are still unanswered pieces that could take us down a rabbit hole that could take longer to solve. So that's the reason I put us at risk. But I would say we're receiving most data in some capacity, and kind of we're in an evaluation phase right now about what it's going to take to fix those things. And some of that might be a technical fix, and some of it might be an outreach fix. But we're kind of in an evaluation phase about how we're going to approach those fixes right now.
That makes sense to me. So if I look at under your expertise, so you think then having the same indicators for all the schools, I mean, if you go like all elementary school, they have the same indicators, the way they can collect the data, and then we move to middle school and high school, so you may solve some of those issues.
Mm-hmm. I think broadly we want to keep the indicators the same as much as possible. We're working towards a product that's standardized. And so I think for the goal, I mean, some elementary might be different than some middle school and some high school, but within those subgroups, I think we are trying to move towards a standardized process.
Right. Thank you.
Board Member Upperman.
Thank you, Chair. I have two questions. One, you mentioned the word data culture, and I don't think that's something that we all feel comfortable with, at least that's my impression. And the other piece is when you're talking about indicators, three questions, indicators, what could you give a couple examples of indicators? And the third thing is, what besides Infinite Campus is internal that you are, what kinds of things are out there that are kind of scattered in a.
Sure.
Okay.
So the indicator component is pretty easy to answer. When we're looking specifically at metrics that impact performance, we're looking at chronic absenteeism, we're looking at attendance, we're looking at truancy, and there's been a lot of work done over past people have held my position. We have kind of standardized an opinion about what are the most important metrics. So kind of thinking through, are these the actual touch points that we want to continue to develop? And then of those pieces, what are the most important to make available to a greater audience, and kind of work through those. Infinite Campus is our in-house database that serves as a repository for most school level data. We have lots of other information that includes data from the state, that some of it is parsed into Infinite Campus, but not all of it. The free and reduced lunch is an example of something that we're querying from an outside source. And the idea, I think, ultimately, is that we would have a place where we could connect. We also have assessment data and all kinds of other test data about students, SAT scores, performance from literacy and early bird and those kind of tests. So we would have a repository where we would take data from Infinite Campus and all of these other data sources and have a unified place to query data. And so I think that's our ultimate goal. That kind of speaks to the first question around data culture. And every organization likes to say they're data-driven. That's kind of the MO. As you go anywhere, you say, we're a data-driven organization. So what we really need to suss out, and what my opinion is how do we use data to make change? And how do we use that to be impactful? So I think PPS is positioned very well, and I think superintendent has laid out a process in which we need to use data to not just make change, but also to evaluate that change on a continuing basis. So I think the culture process is not just to say we need data, it's to use data and then see how that improves outcomes in the long term. So I think that speaks to all of your questions.
Thank you, Board Member Opperman. Any other questions from the board on that objective? Matt, I just want to say we're really glad you're here, and this is just really exciting, and I love the way that you're thinking about our data. And I was just saying to Aura, I didn't know that we didn't have a big holder of all of our data, and that you're doing everything in piecemeals and bringing it together, and just how inefficient that must be. So I'm excited to see how this moves forward and the impact it can have on our district. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm very excited. I'll be back in February.
Perfect. Now we're going to move to objective 2.2, service delivery model for specialized programs. Who's got questions? Vice Chair Bondo, I saw that finger. Sneaky finger.
Thank you. Thank you. So I have two questions there. So just to understand, are we still those buildings who have our special program, do they are receiving the Title IX funding or not?
I'm sorry,
The Title IX, because we have some funding supporting the needs of some other school, like East End School, they're just receiving some funding, extra funding, right?
Are you referring to
Yes.
the Title I?
Yes, the
funding?
Title I, I'm sorry, I don't know where
Yeah.
I went to nine. Yes, the Title I.
Yes, they are. But that does, I mean, there may be overlap for students who both have an IEP and may be economically disadvantaged, but
Right.
the specialized programs work is not funded directly from the Title I work kind of services.
Different ways.
Yeah, a different level of supports and so
Okay.
forth. So yeah, the Title I funding is
Yeah.
not directed towards specialized programs.
Okay, thank you for letting me know. So for the stabilization, I just want to understand a little bit about, so we have an issue to try to stabilize the program. Is the way we are supporting those students in need, or just because of the shortage of the staff?
well, I mean, I think it's both and they're related. So, the programs that I particularly named, even more than other specialized programs, require a lot of staff to operate, and we certainly have vacancies and a staffing shortage, and we're not, Portland is not unique in that
Right.
at all, of course. And so that is 100%, a major challenge. It's also true that the more that we can support, by we, I mean the central team can support the staff in those programs with establishing all those things that you need to run a program, like the individual student programming, the schedules, that it will help to mitigate some of the issues that we have around staffing, if that makes sense. So so it's both, and I would say they're connected closely to each other.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you.
Sure.
Board Member Opperman?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your presentation, and I have to say that I know the special ed teachers that I've touched base with work extremely hard under very difficult situations as far as having supportive staff for them. What I would ask is, in your hiring and of regular staff, whether it's teachers, ed techs, or substitute teachers, what kind of training are they getting in order to support? So observing one teacher and a group, and sometimes I observed some people that were doing fabulous work even as a sub, but others not seeming to know what they need to do. And so I'm just wondering, as you do the hiring, what kind of criteria and hiring, or if you have to hire someone that may not be up to snuff yet, who would need to learning, how are you planning that?
Well, I think it's hard to answer that question generally, because it will depend on the program and the needs. I think we certainly, when we're bringing folks in, say like now in the middle of the year, often the focus will be on helping them get set up to support, say, one or two specific students so that they can do that. We deliver PD, monthly to the programs, and we often try to make it specific to that program and to their needs. So that can involve getting folks more grounded in some of the work that the program is doing as well. But certainly, we are focused on getting folks in and helping them get into a place where they can be engaged and supportive in a positive way as quickly as possible. And it's a process. Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
If the situation is extreme and overwhelming, is there a backup service for teachers? I'm just thinking, in the time I was there for several hours, there didn't seem to be a way that a person could have a break. And I said, well, are you going to take a break? And I said, I can't, because I need to be able to supervise the ed techs. So I guess that's my concern, I presume you know that, or if you don't know that, if you could figure it out.
Absolutely. I think any of these programs that are sort of, I would say, staff intensive, that's a great example of a logistical issue that is hard, no matter the circumstances, right? Because you need folks with the students. So I don't have a great general answer for that, but one of the things we are trying to work with the programs on is, as an example, right? How can we establish scheduling that will allow folks to get, there are programs where folks are, of course, getting their breaks, and we're able to do that. So depending on the situation, we are often, my team is leaning in more to help them try to get that organized. The last thing I'll say on it is just, that's something that we would try to take into account as we're considering staffing models and things like that, of course, is the appropriate.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, last question has to do with budgeting. I noticed your timeline and trying to figure out what's going on, and we're hitting into budgeting season, and I didn't know how you felt about next year's budget and figuring out what you need to do early enough to get it in the budget. So that's my last one, promise.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say probably, the focus will be on the question, really, the biggest question in my mind is, are we using the existing resources we have as effectively as possible? So I think that's kind of the entry point. But I absolutely expect that if we are, would be considering additional budget needs, that yes, we would be working to get those in on time. I don't have specifics on that right now, of course.
Yeah, well, that's what I was saying, because planning is so hard.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Appreciate
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Board Member Grant.
Just roughly how many kids are we servicing through these three programs? It's total head count.
Sure. So, it's I would say it's around 180 students total. The large majority in Breathe.
Okay,
Yeah.
combine them on the three.
Yeah.
Do you know how that marks historically? Are we up, down, level?
I don't have a good answer on the historical.
Okay.
I think I will say we've expanded the Breathe programming, so I imagine it's increased historically,
Yeah,
but
sure.
Plus the number of students with IEPs in the district is increasing.
And how many kids do we have in out-of-district placements?
A little under 40.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Other questions from board members? I had just one question. I'm curious because, these programs have been around a while, and I understand that we have some staffing issues that are very real. But I guess I'm curious if some of this work had gotten to a point of completion and now has moved backwards, or is some of this work around curriculum decisions, program management, those sorts of things, are those things that were never in place and we're now doing? Kind of can you talk a little bit about why at this point we're working on foundational pieces?
Yeah, I think the best, and I don't know, Aaron, if you want to weigh in on this, the best answer I would give you is that, and something I should have mentioned in my presentation is, this year for the first time, we have a dedicated specialized program team. There's an assistant director on my team, Caitlin Miller, who leads that, and we have not had that before. So the work on specialized programs has been, I think, done more sort of program by program. Mm-hmm. So it's not that there weren't things in place, but it has not been sort of, unified in that way. Okay. So I think that's part of what we're doing, is not necessarily starting from scratch, but looking at how can we get it to be uniform appropriately across the district and therefore manage it more effectively.
Thank you. That's helpful context.
Sure.
Any other questions on this? Okay, we'll go to 2.3, which is our
ESOL.
ESOL. Thank you, Aaron. Any questions from the board? I was just really excited. Well, I'll talk first on this one. Yeah, no, I just thought it was really exciting that we've made so much progress on that already, that like we have a pilot getting ready to launch for 100 staff. Like that is just so cool. And that we already have the program at UMF. I just think this is a great example of where we are like out in front of every school in Maine. So I just appreciate your work on this. And then I'll give it to Board Member Opperman.
Thank you. Thank you. I know Carlos is not here, but when I had a couple questions, and they're kind of hard to pull into when you in the presentation, it mentioned contracted support for developing the ESOL. Now, I know part of that would be the USM and UMF programs. When you're doing PD on this, is that contracted support in the classroom or in the school?
No, I mean, because this is really around just organizational capacity building, right? So it's essentially a project manager. It's a small to help. I mean, the Department of Language Development's plate is quite full, as we know. We've seen an increase of about 18% in terms of the numbers of ELs in our system over the past year. So this is just to be able to continue to move this forward, right? In addition to the ongoing work of PD and training that they do with our existing ESOL staff and so forth. So that's what that referred to. So a former educator who's worked with us for a long time, Maureen Fox, who's done amazing work, is supporting us on a very part-time basis to help do some of the research and inform some of the programming.
Okay, good. Thanks.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay. My other last question on this is in the EDU 504 from UMF. What is the time frame that I presume it's distance learning, and I wonder, or are they coming to Portland? That would be part of the question. And if a person were to invest and go into this particular class, how much time would they be spending on it, and what's the hour that a day that happens? Just a logistic thing, because having taken classes after work is an interesting dynamic.
Right. I'll need to confirm those details. That's a place where I'm not at that level of detail around the class schedule and so forth, but we can kind of confirm what that looks like.
Okay, thanks.
Beautiful. Board Member Russell-Vetter.
Thank you, Chair. And I want to just echo the excitement about just seeing all of this coming to fruition. It's wonderful. I just wanted to clarify that I was understanding correctly the plan about piloting, so beginning in winter, spring. So is that in the pre-K setting specifically, that's what's going to be happening?
Well, yeah, with the pre-K educators,
okay.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And so is that across, because I saw the 100 educators, is that in the pilot, or that's sort of the goal to sort of from there then expand 100? I'm trying to get.
I mean, that 100 is inclusive of the cohort of pre-K educators, the cohort of new teachers that we're working with, and the number, our targets in terms of recruitment for the university partnerships.
Okay, great. And so that will be in like particular pre-Ks across the district? Will it also be like our outside, our?
No, all of the pre-K educators are inclusive of our, partner site.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Any other questions? Yep, Board Member Grant.
Just want to flag one thing on this related to an offline discussion we've had about rulemaking. I don't know if it's on your radar, but there is a proposal now to reduce the number of semester hours required for ESL.
Speak into your microphone, sorry.
There's a rulemaking proposal now, if you're not, it's not on your radar, to reduce the number of semester hours required for ESOL conditional certifications. Just flagging that we might want to put our thumb on the scale there as well.
Great. Thank you.
Great. Any other questions about this objective? Okay, then we're going to move to 2.4, advancing equity literacy. Yeah, Vice Chair Bondo.
Yeah. So I saw that we are on track, but just wonder on the challenges. And I know you mentioned about the scheduling on the PDs, for some other teachers. So if we are on track, I just wonder how many do you have on the top of your head? How many percentage on the PD we have already accomplished, and how many teachers?
None
have
yet
attended? None
for
yet?
equity leaders. We are just getting started with them. So they have some time to prepare for that, and then they lead that at their school. So at every school site, they're going to work on getting that scheduled. They may schedule it for January, February,
Right.
they have lead time to get to that first one, and then more lead time to get to that next one.
Okay, so let me just go to the sub question. So any feedback about any positive move to that, or any, people just holding on that because it's just too much on the top on their own schedule? You have a positive feedback, even though they're still, working on the scheduling, but people are taking those kind of options. They are open to be able to be part of that, or it's just some.
This is required. I mean, it's
That is a
required.
requirement.
Yeah, it's required at every school site. That's how we've done it every year, is a certain number, depending on, kind of the collective number of priorities.
Right.
So that, really is about the collaboration with school leaders, about making sure it gets scheduled and supporting the equity leaders with their school leaders,
Okay.
around the implementation of that.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions on this? Oh, yes, Board Member Bilio.
Thank you. Can you explain to me what an equity literacy, or what the literacy entails and how it's decided?
So equity literacy is a term coined by the Equity Literacy Institute, which is the kind of skills and mindsets people need to have in order to be effective in their interactions and in really rooting out inequities in our practice. And so the two things are the Equity Leaders Cohort, which I've talked about, which has been this is in our 5th year, is our training of trainers program, where teachers from every site participate, not just teachers, actually, teachers and other educators and other staff come together and learn different topics in equity literacy, and then do turnaround training at their sites. And then the other piece is the equity-oriented leadership, which is the professional development for our leadership team. So principals, assistant principals, department heads, that group. And that has similar themes at times, but this year that's also where we lift the professional development for leaders around staff culture work, around teacher retention work, around hiring, and how we continue to advance hiring practices. All of that happens through the equity-oriented leadership group.
And so does the Equity Literacy Institute have a program that y'all adopt? And then is that how you're doing your work, or?
No, we have, in the past, we've worked with outside organizations to kind of develop the training, but now we really run it internally, where we work within our own kind of collection of folks with expertise to develop the training and then create the turnaround training.
Okay, so sorry, I'm just trying to understand. So you're relying on leaders within the school community to create those specific culture.
So we really create it with them, we really create it together.
Mm-hmm.
They are responsible for the turnaround training. So it's a training of trainers model.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. I just needed that clarification.
Thank you. Board Member Opperman.
Yeah. A follow-up to Member Billiou's. In that PD, is it, and when you say you're going to train the trainer, you're not using a particular organization, is it a talk at you, this is a talk situation, or do you actually use transformative learning techniques for adult learners, for example?
Oh, absolutely. So we might use case studies, or there might be a reading that grounds it, where people will, dialogue about that. It's looked all different ways, because we've covered many, many topics through this approach in the last several years. So, it varies based on the topic, what's the right approach. And, we'll use videos. Sometimes we've used videos that we've created, sometimes, externally created things, it depends on the topic and how that's done, but it is, designed to be grounded in adult learning theory and, to be effective professional learning.
I just was at a meeting, actually for PTO people that Grace Venezuela led, in which she created a situation where we did not know what she was saying because she was speaking in a foreign language. Very effective, I think, and that kind of not just looking at or talking about, but actually experiencing something and role playing or of sorts.
Absolutely.
So do you do any role playing?
Oh, yeah. 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 I mean, again, it depends on the topic and the amount of time, and the equity leaders, as leaders in their school with their administrators, they also have autonomy to design and implement that in the way that's right in their school. So like one school, they'll do like sort of a rotation of topics, and that's how they'll have like smaller groups. And that's just a thing that's how they've always done it, so it's designed to be customized and is supported to be that way.
I just want to make sure it's effective too, because
Absolutely.
that's the critical thing. Is just we're dealing with systemic racism or
Absolutely.
systemic anything. It's hard to change it within the system.
Absolutely.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
Yeah, I just want to say, I kind of personally, I feel like it's hard to rely on teachers to kind of create something like that, or like a programming like that, because personally, I would think equity would be different for each and every one of those people. And so how relying on them to create that type of programming, or even determine what that space looks like, how, like, does it change over time? Like, where is the consistency? So I think that we should really take some time to resource ourselves. I mean, I don't know what Equity Literacy Institute does, but I've said this a lot of times. I'm sure you've heard, but I think we really should try to resource or outsource our community and people that are centered around this and people that are doing this work. I mean, I don't know if I'm making sense, but really more of like how, like even the representation, like how are we making sure those voices are represented? Is it literally just like 5 white women that are teaching these classes? So, I mean, I'm sure that's not the case, but I don't know that. And so there's not any consistency in that. Like, how do we get a consistent understanding of equity so that we can implement that in all of the schools? And it doesn't have to be up to those teachers to kind of like rely on their learning and their educational process.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's much more supported than that. And I mean, the folks who are coming to this also bring expertise as well, but really we're articulating a certain framework, right? And, I'd be happy to chat more about the evolution of that, because it is, we have been doing it for many years. We have used outside organizations at times. Like we've had multilingual has been deeply involved. We did a whole session around supporting multilingual learners, and, that then the educators with support turn around. But it really is, a deeper conversation, which I'd be happy to have with you.
Yeah, could you just send me some of the material so I can have a better understanding? Thanks. I'm good.
Awesome. And also Paul Gorski is one of the people at the Equity Literacy Institute, and I'm pulling some of his writings together for the board orientation in January, because I do think that the board should also be very grounded in this idea of equity literacy. And there's a lot of tools out there, and I do find it to be one of the better ones in terms of like actually providing a roadmap and anchors to the work. So
and the equity policy, which all of you were a part of passing, is grounded in that framework as well, and follows a very similar
actually,
definition.
I think that predates a ton of us. So I'm going to bring that
Really?
back as well into the equity policy. Yeah. Or into the board orientation. Yeah. No, it's okay. It's good. We're all doing the work.
Can't remember the timing, I guess. Sorry.
No, that's okay. That's okay. Anything else on this objective? Okay. Seeing none, we're going to move to the last objective, consolidated educational facility. Oh, wait, is that a finger? Okay. Vice Chair Bondo, take it away.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. So, yeah, I just have a little clarification. So can you just explain if you have a different ways to recruit students or to recruit, because I see challenge here are to expand your parents' representations here on the design team. So I'm just wondering to know what's the criteria to recruit on the building level, like on the design team for the building level, and also if it's the different ways in the community, because it's about the outreach, because I try just to define myself. We have a lot of parents right there. So how can we have that big challenge? So I just want to understand. And then the sub one is how diverse is your design team?
Okay. So in terms of the challenge of recruitment, I think we do have a lot of parents in our school. And so I think one of the things last year when we set out to recruit members of the design team, there was a process that we developed and we worked with the building principals to help us with that. In terms of trying to get more students on the team, right now what I've been doing is actually reaching out to our Make It Happen coordinators and our ELO coordinators and asking them and others who work with students to sort of share names, and they've shared some names, and so I'm going to follow up to meet with those students and just share that we're looking for a diversity and a good representation. And it's really just to add a couple more to the team, but really also trying to think strategically about how to include more students. And so the students on the design team who are very much invested in the work, trying to think about how to utilize them as leaders in their school buildings, engage more students. At our last design team meeting, we were actually, the folks that went to the school visits were sharing. We had one new student who, it was their second time coming to the design team meeting, and he was sharing in his small breakout group. He shared, oh my goodness, I'm very much invested in this. This is an awesome idea. He said, before I came and I was, asked to come to this, I was against this entire thing. He was, and he said his friends are against it too. Until he came and actually sat in the meetings and heard what this is really all about and what it's going to bring to students in the community. And so he was thinking so part of our discussion last time was really, how do we really do a good intentful job in engaging so people understand what we're doing and there's buy-in. So I think that we are going to add maybe one or two more students that are not represented, but that still leaves a lot of students out. So just trying to think about what structures are in the 3 high schools where either I can go or other design team members can go and engage in these conversations with students. The parent engagement part, I guess one of the things is we've talked about, last year we focused on just engaging high school parents, and we sent out communication to all of them, and then 8th grade families as well. And then this year, going to the work, it became clear we're looking at, this is not a short-term project, and so the families that'll really benefit from this are the middle school, but even more so elementary school parents that need to be on board.
Right.
And so just trying to think about timing. We've got a lot that's been going on, so that's honestly part of it too, is timing between how do we communicate and not confuse people about what we're communicating, because we've had the strategic, committee and meetings and all of that we've been communicating. And so there's the high school transition coming up, virtual night coming up as well. So there's we're working towards a strategic plan of how to communicate intentfully without confusing folks and people going crazy because there's just too much out there happening. But we are working on doing that. And that's one of the things for December, to make sure that we do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Any other questions? Oh, thank you. Board Member Brennan.
Thank you, Chair.
It's cold.
It's very cold.
For those watching at home, it's very cold here.
Thank you so much for all this information. I'm so excited. As a parent of an elementary school child, I'm in that cohort. Very excited, and just excited for all of the students in Portland looking to the future. The part of your presentation where you were talking about going to the schools in Massachusetts and the level of where they've been able to get to in terms of culture and energy and respect and, engagement for students. I mean, that was so cool to hear about. And I'm curious, what is being done or will be done soon to bring some of that stuff into our schools now, because you don't need a new building to do that work. So I'm curious about that.
I guess one point I'll speak to directly, in terms of the high standards and rigor, and also having teachers sort of be at the forefront of leading this work and all of that. We're actually doing that currently with our cross-district professional development. So we have 5 that we put on the calendar for this year. And so we're having teacher leaders from their schools, right? So we have like a pre-planning session for the facilitators, but then we have them sort of take lead and ownership in looking at the portrait of a school community, and facilitating conversations across in their content area with colleagues. And they're actually looking at this year assessments. So they're looking at the standards that's in the grade book. Like, what are they holding kids to, accountable to? Where's their alignment? Where isn't there? And then in alignment, creating exemplar assessments that they all agree upon. And there's also criteria from research, what best practices and all of that, and what's in the portrait of a graduate. And then with those assessments, having that be completed by the end of the year, and then every time they make an assessment, right, holding that up as a mirror against these exemplar assessments, 1 to 4 assessments, to make sure it hits on all of those, and then having student work accompanying that so that we can see what that looks like as well. So engaging teachers in doing that work, and so that there's that ownership and understanding of what's happening. In terms of, so one of the other things is in terms of how do we bring this like sort of career technical education and start doing this move a little bit too, is in part of that, when we bring the folks together, is that PATS educators for the first time are actually part of the professional development. So they're engaging in this with our educators at Portland, Deering, and Casco Bay High School. And so they're talking about standards together. They're listening to what's happening. And so then there's this collaboration we're starting right now, so that as we move down the road, right, we can think more about how to integrate smoothly, and as well as currently, if we involve PATS educators, then it's easier for us to then give credit to students that go to PATS, because we've had challenges with that. We have students that come here, but they don't receive graduation standards credits, because there's this lack of knowledge about what it is that they're actually doing when they're at PATS. And so we're trying to like close that gap and unify folks.
Super. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah, Board Member Opperman.
Thank you, Chair. I'm so excited about the school. I think it's going to be fantastic. I have a couple thoughts and questions. One, Casco Bay is part of the discussion on the school, but it's not going to be part of the consolidation, or that isn't determined yet. You don't know yet, or it's good.
Correct.
Okay.
We don't know. And that's one of the things it looks like.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to ask another question. I just was saying it wasn't clear yet.
Yeah, at this point, that is not a question that we're answering in part of this. Part of this right now is the question of what does the school in an ideal situation look like? Mm-hmm. And then we figure out who is part of it, how does it structure, all of that.
Okay, so that's my next question, has to do with who's part of it. And I don't know whether Blackstone Valley Tech has a CTE section, has a multi-sending. Do they have other school districts that send students to them for tech? Or do those other districts' students come in and are part of the whole project, part of the school?
Yeah, so great question.
Yeah, I know. It's a concern for.
Right, yes, districts. Yeah. So they have sending schools, and they're at full capacity, and it's just because like there's another school like, Minuteman is similar. There's so many kids that want to have that experience. They don't have the capacity. So what started happening is, especially in Massachusetts, is we've had the public high schools that have been sort of getting funding to try and like have this be part of programming within a regular high school. And so that kids get that experience as well. So that is how they're set up. And one of the things coming back here that, we're still in conversation at the district level and with Kevin Silfen, who's the director of the PATS program, is how do we get this to work, given that there are sending schools to PATS as well, and how to logistically make that happen. Now, just to share, last week, I went with our grade 9 teams, teachers to East Hartford High School. And it was actually, if you recall, one of our work groups is to strengthen our grade 9 structures and culture systems. And so we went over there, and they were actually, one of the things they witnessed was a really strong data culture, as Matt Power spoke about, which was amazing. And so one of the takeaways was, what is it that we need to have in place to support them in recreating that? And they had a really high, they had over like 70 like BIPOC students. There was like very diverse student body and very like actually few white students. So it was just really interesting to see how they're able to pull this off. And the other piece is the CTE program, like the hands-on technical education, is actually within their schools. So the only thing is, so so they have actually that in their school, so that they have kids that selected, but because it's not fully immersed and they've started just building it slowly, there's still like a wait list for kids to get into that program, but it's actually built in as part of their curriculum, and it's not a separate building they go to. So they're starting to integrate that as well. And so I think other people are starting to see this is very valuable and this is how education should look. And so and so that makes it, one of the things that coming out of that too, for our grade 9 teachers that were there, and we also had an assistant principal that was there, was just to think about, wait, they've got they seem to have so many resources, but I think for those that went to visit for the first time, they were thinking, actually, an integration or consolidation might mean that we free up resources and we have more to spread across and to service our students, because we, rather than how we have it here. So that conversation started happening there. Yeah.
Because, well, the CTE is independently funded. It's in our budget wise. So that would be an interesting dynamic in that. And I had sat in a meeting of the sending teachers at paths and superintendents and all, and the vision to them of what a consolidated school might be something to consider having a greater conversation with, because they're not sure what's going on.
Yeah, that would be great. And honestly, Kevin Silfen, our director for PATS, was one of the ones that went on these visits, and he walked out of there like he's like, wait, what we have here is not CTE, because it was like, it's totally different. It's just that the academics and the technical career education, it's like melded into one. It's not just here. It's more like what you consider as a Voc school. And so it was for him too. It was a really and he would share, it's a real big takeaway in terms of like what we need to consider changing in our high schools, but also what Pat's he was able to see it. So like, I need to think about how we do things differently as well. So that kids are, the academic piece is fitting into there, but it's easier to do when you have, like you're together.
And
yeah.
That's great. Thank you. And can I say one more thing?
Yes.
Thank you, everybody. We've grilled you, and I appreciate your patience. And I thought the presentation was enlightening, and that's what we need. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I'll just second that. Just super exciting updates. And Pamela, please keep the board updated if there's ways that we can be directly working with community members around education, around this as well, because I know that's something we're all really invested in. So please give us directives. And just wanted to thank Superintendent Scallon. I think that this meeting and the last meeting, the amount of information that has come out and that we're now all, we have as tools, and the focus that is being provided to us is just really outstanding. So thank you for all that work, and thank your teams for the work for getting it to us. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And if anybody wanted to look at these objectives, is it on the website anywhere? Do you know?
It is on the website. It is under the strategic planning tab. I'll pull it up while
That'd be
Dr.
great.
Warren's presenting, and we can put it up just so we can show folks how to
Perfect.
navigate there.
Perfect. Great. So now we're going to move into report of the secretary. After that, I think we'll take a small recess to water and dewater before doing safety management plan. Okay. Sound good to everybody? Beautiful. Okay, so consideration action to approve the meeting minutes for November 14th, 2023. Are there any corrections to the meeting minutes for November 14th, 2023? Okay, so seeing no corrections, then the minutes are going to be approved as distributed. So now I'm going to move us into a 10-minute recess. So we'll be back here in our seats, please, at 7:45. Thank you.
Out there.
Hold on one second. Superintendent Scowen's going to share something quickly. Perfect. Okay, so this is like at any time if the public wants to look at the objectives or anybody on the board. I mean, we have them linked in every board update that we get, but this is where they are on the website. So if you go to About and then Strategic Planning.
You can, if you go to strategic plan, you can then see the notes from the listen and learn. And if you click on strategic plan, you will then get an update on both the process for the future as well as the 23-24 actions. And that's what we talked about this evening.
Great, thanks for that. Okay, so now we're going to move into our board focus, which is on the safety and management plan.
Yeah, just as a little bit of context for this. So we as a school team had committed to bringing this topic back and presenting it to the board after the shooting hoax that had happened at Casco Bay. And so tonight we will have Dr. Warren and Deputy Superintendent Townsend present an update on our emergency management plan. It'll include both a where are we, what have we done, and what are we going to do? It is not an item that is up for board action tonight, but instead will be up in the policy committee in April and then in the board in May for approval. And so this is really designed to be an update and to keep you informed on where we are at to make sure that we continue to have the safe, secure learning environments that we have in all of our schools. And so with that, I will pass it to Dr. Warren.
Great. Thank you. And good evening, Chair Lentz, board members, Dr. Scallon, and members of the public. It's great to be here. First of all, just a quick overview of where we're heading in the next few minutes. So we'll give you an overview of the draft plan that we have written thus far, which we'll continue to work on over the next several months. We'll share our timeline and the plan that we have for revising and getting to that final version, and then a brief update on where we are right now as of today, going back to August. So this framework should look fairly familiar. This was presented back in August when Deputy Superintendent Townsend presented around the work that we were doing. What we'll be focusing on tonight largely sits in the bottom of that triangle. To some degree, the annual training, and certainly to a large extent, the incident response training. So according to our board policy EBCA, we have a requirement to create a safety and emergency management plan. And there are 4 required components to that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about each of those components. The draft plan is actually available on board docs so people can read what's there now. So there's a fair amount more detail in the actual document, but I'll just hit some of the highlights. So the first section focuses in on a description of what's in the plan and the purpose. And as Superintendent Scallon said, really our goal here is to make sure that our school and school communities are safe, welcoming, and joyful places. And in order to do that, we have to make sure that we have a strong plan in place prior to anything happening. And when you think about emergency management, we're thinking broadly about what we need to do to prepare ourselves as well as how we would respond. So the scope of this plan covers all of that. So the beginning section goes through that, but also then talks about the timeline and the process for updating it, which we'll get to in a little bit more detail in a few minutes. So I'm going to leave that for now. The second key component that's required here by policy is our plan for auditing. And one of the things that we have called out here in this plan is that we will do at least a once a year safety audit in each of our schools and each of our sites. So when I talk about auditing, I mean looking for things like safe exits, marked exits, making sure that our schools and our work sites have a plan in place for welcoming visitors and documenting who's coming into the school, making sure that our fire alarms work. So these audits we hope to be doing in partnership with our city colleagues, fire and police in particular. But that is the sort of key component of that segment is around an annual audit in each site. So the roles and responsibilities is important in the sense that when you get into an emergency situation, it's very essential, and it really, I think, in some ways is the most essential part, is that everybody understands who's going to be doing what and who will be in charge, what the chain of command is. So we have laid out a clear chain of command in the document, which both looks at what we have put in place at the district level, and actually Deputy Superintendent Townsend is the key point of contact at the district level. At the school level, when something occurs, anyone can call 911, right? If there's an immediate emergency, call the authorities. But ultimately, the principal or the person who's designated at the school level or at the site level should be the one who's making that call to the district to set these procedures in motion. And they are also the one who's communicating information to the folks on site so that people know what's happening and where they need to be going and what they should be doing. And then once an emergency starts to evolve and that notification system gets put in place, then there's a whole process for the district level team to come in and provide support, with the on-site command being Deputy Superintendent Townsend in most cases. Or if he's not available, we would have a backup. So let me just back up a little bit there. That's the broad scope. If you look at the plan, you'll see that it's broken down by 4 key components. And that is a framework that's provided by FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency. So they talk in terms of mitigation first. And those are the things that we do to try to prevent an incident from happening or to lessen the impact of a potential incident if it happens. So things like making sure our facilities are in good condition, we've got our exits all marked out, we've got those systems in place for welcoming people. Anything we can do to prevent an accident from happening at all, and then making it less bad if it does happen. So that's the mitigation piece. Then there's a series of strategies that we've laid out around preparedness. So making sure that we have trained people, that we have clear plans in place, not only this plan at the district level, but also site-based plans. So we currently have a school plan or a site plan for each location. And after we continue to do the work on this, we will go back and look at those school-based and site-based plans and keep updating them to make sure that they're as tight and as strong as possible. So preparedness not only includes making sure we know what we're going to do, but also training people. So there's a lot of training going on already, and we will continue and increase and deepen that. We have focused primarily on staff so far, but we are also working on adapting our training materials to make them developmentally appropriate for our students, and we will work on providing appropriate training for students as well. So there's the preparedness component, and then there's the emergency response. So that's what we actually do when something happens. So we make sure that, again, the chain of command is clear and in order. We have clear, strong communications, both at the site, wherever the incident is happening, as well as with our community surrounding us, and that we are prepared to do whatever needs to be done in a particular situation. So we know that you can never anticipate all of the different eventualities and twists and turns that could happen in a particular situation. But our goal is to be as prepared as possible so that when that time comes, things can move as smoothly as possible. The chain of command is followed, the communications happen, and we keep everybody as safe as possible by doing whatever is appropriate in that situation, be that shelter in place, a lockdown, an evacuation, perhaps a relocation. And so it both gets determined at the site level, and then there's a certain amount of judgment that people have to use at the classroom level or the office level as well, depending on the situation. People may have to make decisions for themselves, and that's part of what the ALICE training that we've been doing prepares people to do. So that's the management component. And then the last piece is recovery. So after an incident occurs, one of our first goals is to make sure that we're clear on what needs to be done to, as quickly as possible, return people safely to school and to work. So that could be looking at what needs to be fixed in a building. It may be a matter of bringing in electricians or carpenters. The fire department may need to give us sign off depending on the situation. So getting people back safely is the goal. And then beyond the physical piece and the timeliness of getting back to our community and our learning and teaching, our goal is to make sure that we're providing whatever social, emotional, and mental health support may be needed for people who are affected. So that includes both students and staff. And in some cases, it may include partners or people in the surrounding community. So those are key elements of that recovery plan. And then the last key piece of that is making sure that we're always taking a step back once we've gotten beyond the emergency and looking at how things went. How did our response go? What can we learn? How can we get better? We don't want to see another emergency happen, obviously, whenever these do occur, but we can't predict, and so when they're happening, we want to make sure that we're learning from what we're doing, as we have been in the couple of incidents that have happened this year. So that's the fourth key component. And then the other piece around this that's really called out beyond those four elements, and again, the chain of command, is a real emphasis on communications. So we know that communications are always critical, but they're especially critical in the case of an emergency. So we have laid out a plan for both the site level communications, again, to be led by the principal or whoever the site command is. And then Deputy Superintendent Townsend takes the lead in making sure that everybody knows what's happening and what the messaging is that should go out to the community. And then our communications team is responsible for taking that and shaping it and getting it out to the broader community. And that's in a nutshell. That's a simple version of the process that we've laid out. But we have been sort of honing that through the experiences that we've had this fall. And we are, deeply committed to making sure that our communications are strong when something like this happens. So I'm going to pause there and ask for Aaron to come up so that he can share a little bit about our timeline.
Thank you, Sarah. So yeah, as the superintendent said, we have been kind of engaged in this work, over the past 6 months as we've kind of prioritized it over the summer in terms of planning for this year, and some of the initial rollout, which I'll speak to in just a moment. Where we're at now is establishing our kind of district safety committee. So we have a small group of administrators, and we'll be looking for some additional partners to join that to establish, our safety committee, so that we can work together with them over the coming couple of months to refine those standard operating procedures, and the overall plan, feedback on the high level overall plan as well. So we, are on the trajectory towards bringing that forward to the Policy and Curriculum Committee in April for review. Again, I think as the last slide noted, the part that we'll be acting upon will be the public part. We'll have a process to be able for board members to engage and see, the actual details of all of the kind of particulars around the safety management plan. But for safety purposes, not all of that is necessarily public. And that's consistent. We've been engaging with a number of our kind of regional school districts in terms of how they they manage this. That's similar across different districts. So we'll bring that forward so that we're ready in May to kind of approve the overall plan. So that has us well positioned for sites to be updating kind of the next update of their plan in preparation for the coming year as we continue to build capacity to ensure safe school communities across the district. The last piece is just a quick recap, and appreciate the opportunity to have spoken with many of you over the past month or so, just around where we're at. But just the quick recap of while this is underway, we haven't been just, we've taken some steps, right, to kind of build towards this overhaul of our plan. So as you'll remember, we kind of launched, decided to make the transition to kind of the ALICE framework, one that's well known. And so did our initial training with administrators to introduce it in August. Based on that, there was guidance for them in updating their school plans for this year, which all sites have completed. Look forward to the work we'll do over this year to strengthen those even further for the coming year. In September, we introduced the framework to staff. We've now been working through a series of follow-ups in partnership with the Portland Police Department and Sergeant Hayden, the training sergeant there, and some of his team, where they've been going to each school site doing 90-minute sessions that's really focused on applying the framework. And so thinking about, in different scenarios in those buildings, how would staff react? So building, both leader and staff comfort and understanding around the framework. Alongside that, we have a team of leaders and some of our mental health team thinking about the adaptations of the kind of training modules so that as schools have the opportunity to have done, the PPD training, they'll be in position to be able to start, the introductions at the student level so that we can get to, some of the additional drills we'll do in this spring. And then the last thing, just highlighting, as, Dr. Warren said there, the after action reviews are kind of a key piece that after each incident has helped both us learn as well as our partners. So we did those after the incident here at Casco Bay Paths, as well as the incident at Lincoln Middle School, and has been something we've done. And even just, thinking back to the Portland High incident, just over a year ago, I guess now as I'm thinking about that, right? And, the collaboration there with PPD in particular. And so they've kind of updated some of their protocols as a result of some of those after action reviews as well. So a key component to make sure even the best laid plans we're modifying and kind of continuing to learn from based on real scenarios. So that is our update. Yep. And so happy to take any questions about where we stand with this work at this time.
Beautiful. Glad to see the question slide is back. Board members, what are you at? Yeah, Vice Chair Bondo.
Thank you. I just have one question on when we talk about the chain command, and I heard we mentioned about the deputy be the chief command, I think. Right, but having a backup in case he's not there. So it's going to be the same for each building. On one side command is going to have a backup person as well.
Yeah, so there's kind of a couple levels of designation of chain of command. There's one at the building level, so that's part of each school's individual plan is kind of who is the initial, typically that's the principal, but there's backups identified in case they're not available. So we've called that our 3 deep kind of planning so that there are kind of 3 options. And then we do that at the central command. And so, my role, within that is to kind of come to the site and be on-site liaisoning with, the Portland Police, Portland Fire Department as necessary, kind of like they establish kind of incident command on site. And so I'm like the district representative in communication with the building command, right, to communicate. And then, typically, it's the superintendent is kind of the overall command and in communication directing kind of district resources in terms of, communications, facilities, technology as necessary.
Okay, right. So can you just remind me what ALICE stands for, please?
No, good quiz.
Hold on. Google.
ALICE, alert, lockdown, informed, or inform, Hang on,
Counter.
wait. No, I was just spelling for myself.
Counter, evacuate.
Counter, and evacuate. We have, just to say, just because we're highlighting the website today, thank you, Dr. Valenzuela. We have the Alice framework and all of this information about our school safety framework on the website. So we can do a little, kind of
All right.
drive
Thank
to
you.
show where that is, but it's defined there. So I don't have to
Perfect.
remember.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Bondo. Other questions from the board? Yeah, Yusuf.
A comment,
Marisa.
maybe not a question, but for the auditing, and it's once a year, wouldn't be 6 months, maybe more, since we check the cameras and people who came.
Well, we're excited to initiate a round of doing it once a year. And once we've built capacity around that, if we can ramp that up to twice a year, we'd look forward to doing that. But, it hasn't been a standard practice to kind of do audits in this way. So I think that's our initial kind of target.
I would agree with that. And I will say that in terms of things like cameras and, other aspects of facilities, we're continuously getting feedback from our schools. And we've got actually a spreadsheet running in facilities of the things that we need to take care of to make sure that we're keeping up. So it's not like we're waiting for an audit to find issues. We're actually constantly looking. And when we see something, we address it.
Great, thank you. My question is just like, how do we measure that these things are working? Like, I know with any training, like we're measuring how many people are getting it, right? How many times it's happening. But how do we know the confidence of staff and students to execute against this, of building leaders? And maybe we're not like quite there yet, but how do we measure that?
I mean, one quick thought, just knowing, that part of, what I recognized is like the level of work we needed to do about our overall plan. So I want to credit Tamara Sweeney, our Director of Facilities, who's participated. So we've had a handful of staff that have participated in a state level kind of like certification around school safety. This course the OE has been providing. So Tamara, Kevin Stilfen at Paths, the nurse at Lincoln has done it. So, folks will tap for the safety committee, but just as around setting some SMART goals around that. So that's one way. And as Tamara brought that forward and I was talking with her over the summer, right, based on what she'd learned, was clear kind of the level of like revision that we would need to kind of be oriented in that framework. So that might be one entry point as we do some of this planning.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think that we're sort of at the front end of that. And some of it may be that we're asking people and we're surveying. And then, I think it's like anything where you don't just learn it on the page or the screen. You need to actually do some of the walkthroughs and, learn how you're going to leave the building or how you're going to gather. How do you use the radios? What's the radio language and how are we going to keep in touch with each other when we're moving groups of students down the street, that kind of thing. So I think actually the hands-on practice with some of those things, I hope will help build a little bit of confidence. And then unfortunately, the truth is that you don't know until it happens. But the more we can, help people understand the basic strategies and do some practice, the more likely they are, if something does occur, to be able to kind of kick into gear and use those.
That's super helpful. And just because I, have gotten a lot of emails over the last year of being on the board from teachers who are like, what happens if my PA system is out? What happens if this? What happens if this? Will there be like a resource that is in schools, either electronically or hard copy, that people will be able to access easily, that will have like these?
Yeah. Yep. So, and thank you for mentioning that because I sort of dropped it. But so there's the general plan that we talked about here, and then the standard operating procedures will go into a lot more detail. What I found when I arrived here is this red book with a spiral binding. So that is the plan that we've had. And what we're trying to do is take that book and go back through that and make sure it's fully up to date and where we want it to be. And effectively, a lot of that detail will ultimately be the standard operating procedures. And we will try to redo something like that so that it's, easily accessible to folks and, they don't need a computer or a phone or whatever. They can just get to it in the building. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions from the board? All right. Beautiful. So thank you very much. Look forward to seeing this work unfold, and just appreciate your quick attention and deep dive into this. Now we're going to move to old business, which is up tonight. We have, oh, goodness gracious. Consideration and action to approve changes to policy JFABD, which is the education of homeless students, which we did a workshop on before and was also, it came up through committee. So is there a motion to approve the changes to policy JFABD, education of homeless students? Thank you, Vice Chair Bondo. Is there a second? Thank you, Board Member Russell-Better. Are there any questions on this motion? All the attachments are in board docs. Okay, seeing none, I'm going to move to public comment on this. I see no one here in the room. I see no hands on Zoom. So I'm going to close public comment. Any board discussion on this policy, or on the motion, I should say. Okay. Then with that, I think we're going to go ahead and move to a roll call vote. Deputy Superintendent.
Great. Let's see. Vice Chair Bondo,
Yes.
Member Bryden,
Yes.
Member Grant,
Yes.
Member Opperman,
Yes.
Member Russell-Better,
Yes.
Member Youssef,
Yes.
Member Ellis,
Yes.
Member Hemon,
Yes.
and Chair Lentz.
Yes. And just to note, Board Member Grant did vote on that because this is part of the area that he can actively vote on. So just wanted to name that. But that means that the motion passes with the students voting with the majority here. With that, we're going to move into personnel. And so up first, we have consideration and action to approve personnel items for the election of teacher candidates 1 year only. Mr. Wilkinson, would you like to speak to this?
Before you have the list of folks since we last convened this a month ago. So 4 folks on the 1 year only list.
Beautiful. So do I have a motion? Thank you, Board Member Youssef. Is there a second? Thank you, Board Member Bryden. We don't take public comment on personnel items. Any questions from the board? Okay, seeing none. Then by roll call vote, please indicate whether you are in favor of this personnel item. Deputy Superintendent Townsend, please call the roll.
Vice Chair Bondo,
Yes.
Member Bryden,
Yes.
Member Grant,
Abstain.
Member Opperman,
Yes.
Member Russell-Better,
Yes.
Member Youssef,
Yes.
Member Ellis,
Yes.
Member Hemon,
Yes.
and Chair Lentz.
Yes, so the motion passes with the students voting with the majority. And then we have consideration and action to approve election of teacher candidates probationary.
We have 2 folks on the list since last month for your approval this evening.
Beautiful. I appreciate these batching. Do I have a motion for this personnel item? Board Member Bryden, is there a second? Thank you, Vice Chair Bondo. We don't take public comment on personnel items. Any questions from the board? Okay, seeing none, let's move to roll call vote. Please indicate whether you're in favor of these personnel items. Deputy Superintendent, please call the roll.
Member Bilyeu,
Yes.
Vice Chair Bondo,
Yes.
Member Bryden,
Yes.
Member Grant,
Abstain.
Member Opperman,
Yes.
Member Russell-Better,
Yes.
Member Youssef,
Yes.
Member Ellis,
Yes.
Member Hemon,
Yes.
and Chair Lentz.
Yes, so the motion passes with the students voting with the majority. And now we're going to move into executive session. We're going to, for the superintendent's evaluation. So we're going to, we'll take a motion to enter into executive session pursuant to 1 MRSA Section 4056A to discuss the superintendent's evaluation. So moved. Thank you, Board Member Bryden. Is there a second? Thank you, Board Member Opperman. All those in favor, we can raise our hand. Okay, I see unanimous hand raising. So now we'll move into executive session. So is there a motion to adjourn?
Yeah.
Thank you, Board Member Opperman. Is there a second?
I second.
Board Member Grant, we're going to do that. Opperman, Grant, raise your, all in favor of adjourning? Beautiful. Okay, so the meeting is adjourned at 9:04.